happy being the sole provider of this tribe. I have the most power.
During his peak, he was a king.
Everybody wants to beat me now.
An athletic drive that 99% of people could only dream of.
He wins the first individual immunity. Ozzy, challenge over. Ozzy wins immunity. Ozzy wins the final immunity.
Two-time winner of the fan favorite award.
The winner was Ozzy.
Record holder in so many different things.
And I plan on breaking my record.
128 days played on Survivor. Ozzy is most known for playing the third most number of days in Survivor history, only behind the likes of Boston Rob and Parvati. Or maybe Ozzy is most known for holding the record for most individual immunity wins in a single Survivor season. 5 wins total, where he shares the elite distinction with Terry Dietz, Colby Donaldson, Tom Westman, Mike Holloway, and Brad Culpepper. Or maybe even Ozzy is best known for having the second most immunity wins overall with 7, only behind Boston Rob with 9. Or even the fact that he holds the record for most team challenge wins in a Survivor career with 24. And if that's not enough, he also has the second most Redemption Island duel wins with 6, only behind Matt Elrod, who was able to win 7. My point is that this dude is a beast when it comes to Survivor challenges, but that does not equal a winning Survivor formula.
Ozzy, tribe has spoken. 7th person voted out of Survivor South. 9th person voted out of Survivor South Pacific. Ozzy, need to bring me your torch. 9th person voted out, the second member of our jury.
As time progressed, as the Survivor landscape changed, Oscar Ozzy Lusth began to fall out of the spotlight. His popularity started to decline, his fans began to leave, and in recent times he would perform the worst in his entire Survivor career. How could he have possibly gotten to this point? This story begins before Ozzy even got a chance to play Survivor for the first time. It's May 2004 in Madison Square Garden, New York City. Survivor All-Stars had just concluded with its now infamous reunion show. Jerry is booed off the stage, Rupert won $1 million for America loving him, and Amber had just beaten Boston Rob for winning the title of sole survivor. See, Survivor All-Stars drew an end to the classic and most popular era in the show's history, and with it we saw an epic conclusion with the most popular players coming back to play the game one more time. But what are we supposed to do after your big concluding chapter? This is where we enter the post-classic era of Survivor. The post-classic era of Survivor had immense pressure placed on its shoulders. See, Survivor was already declining in popularity, and the show had a difficult task of developing more fan favorites, with the likes of Rob Cesternino, Colby Donaldson, Tina Wesson, Jerry Manthe, and Ethan Zahn. Now, I'm not going to flat out say Survivor failed at this, because they were able to find some heroic gems, but they would tend to feel like diamonds in the rough instead of a complete cast of fan favorites. I don't even think Jeff Probst understood how popular of a player they had on their hands with Ozzy Lusth when he first appeared in the fall of 2006 with Survivor Cook Islands.
When I saw the tribes were split right along racial lines was, oh god, this is gonna be hard.
With the 13th season of Survivor, we would begin to see the rise in Ozzy's popularity, but this would just be the beginning for our now 4-time Survivor legend. That is actually an interesting topic of the list of players that should be considered Survivor legends. After going through his 4-season Survivor career, I'll be answering that question: does Ozzy deserve to be considered a Survivor legend? Ozzy was able to grab agency in the original Aitutaki tribe with his natural likability and fitness level, and it's here we get to witness the iconic Billy Garcia boot episode.
It's Candace, and in between,
Candace from Roro tribe.
yeah, after the last challenge, we sort of mouthed the words "I love you" to one another.
However, we also saw the beginning of the darker side of Ozzy with this moment.
Billy's just dead weight. At this point, it's only the second tribal council, so we might as well cut our losses now and get on with the game.
This would be the very first instance of Ozzy's condescending attitude, and although the producers would hide it for most of the season, it would be incredibly important to remember when we begin discussing his fall as a Survivor player. Ozzy's eventual claim to fame would arise during the 9th episode of the 13th season of Survivor, November 9th, 2006. See, everyone loves a strong underdog story, and the story of the I-24 Alliance might be the biggest underdog story in the history of Survivor. Down 4 players to 8 from the opposing Rarotonga tribe, it looked like all hope was lost for Sundra, Becky, Yule, and Ozzy. But with the power of a little bit of luck, some production spice, challenge ability, and the super idol, we were in for a treat as episode after episode members of the Raro Alliance were being eliminated until all that was remaining was the I-24.
Well, the 4 of you did what seemed impossible to make it to this point.
A Along the way, we saw something amazing happen with the battle between the mind and the body, as at the same time Ozzy was showcasing one of the best physical performances in Survivor history, Yul was showcasing one of the best strategic performances in Survivor history, and with them both making it to the final Tribal Council, Survivor fans were finally going to get the answer to the question, what is more important between mental and physical? In poetic fashion, Yul beat Ozzy in a 5-4 vote, and with that we would see Ozzy get the closest to the title of sole survivor and the $1 million prize that he would ever get.
Yul, who dominated strategically like maybe nobody else ever has. Ozzy, who dominated physically.
But in a crazy turn of events, Ozzy would be given the title of the most clever game at the reunion show, and in the process beat out fellow competitor Yul by less than 1% of the votes. The significance of this vote in highlighting the rise in Ozzy's popularity cannot be dismissed, as unlike the vote for the title of sole survivor, this vote was completely determined by the fans. However, Ozzy's overall approval by the Survivor community would only grow from this point forward. February 2008, or better known as the start of the Golden Age of Survivor. The Golden Age of Survivor is defined by the community as being the longest stretch of quality seasons and ranges from China all the way to heroes versus villains. The 16th season of Survivor would really help set the tone for what the rest of the Golden Age would look like. Survivor Micronesia fans versus favorites. It seriously cannot be taken lightly how big of characters overall, but more importantly how big of a threat Ozzy was going into this season. Remember what I said about Survivor running into the issue of needing to build more popular players after the conclusion of All-Stars? Well, this was put on full display right here. We had players like Fairplay, Yowman, Sari, James, and of course Ozzy as notable fan favorites. But we were also left with scratching our heads at the other casting decisions. Why are we bringing players like Parvati and Penner back? It's not a crazy strategy to think of that in a returning player's season, the characters with the biggest targets on their back are usually the same players that were the most popular in their previous seasons, and we will actually see the same phenomena come up again later in the video. The stars aligned, maybe he got lucky, or maybe we are watching one of the greatest Survivor games of all time, as Ozzy was doing the unthinkable at the start of the game, formed a majority alliance with James, Sari, Amanda, and Parvati on the favorites tribe. He gained even more power with finding the hidden immunity idol, and on day 13 was fully in the driver's seat as it looked like he was making the decisions on who was being sent home, by eliminating Joel, Chet, Tracy, and Amy before the merge. We already knew about Ozzy's physical Survivor abilities, but it looked like as if he was coming into this season as a strategic threat as well. But something had changed this time around as well. Ozzy was losing challenges and he didn't like it. Before the merge, he would end up going to Tribal Council 6 different times, and for a physical threat like Ozzy, this didn't make sense. However, this wouldn't be what led to his downfall, as his agency in the game allowed him to dictate who was being sent home, even though he wasn't winning the challenges. No, Ozzy's downfall this time around was his ego, possibly from being blindsided with his love for Amanda, or maybe he thought it was going to be a cakewalk to get to the finish line. But on day 27, Ozzy was blindsided and the Black Widow Brigade was formed. I think being blindsided in such a devastating fashion by the Black Widow Alliance actually boosted Ozzy's overall popularity and the feeling from the community that he needs to play again. His first season he made it to the end and lost by a single vote, and this time around it appeared as if he was dominating the game until day 27, and being blindsided by the most iconic alliance in Survivor history made it feel like Ozzy had just gotten unlucky this time around. Survivor South Pacific. After his appearance in season 16, fans would need to wait patiently for 3 years for Ozzy to return to Survivor. And fun little fact, this would make Ozzy the first person to play Survivor 3 times and not compete in Heroes vs Villains. If there was ever going to be a season for Ozzy to win, it was this one right here. With Ozzy having one of the best challenge records in history and Redemption Island appearing this season, Ozzy had no fear about being voted out. In fact, he actually made it part of his strategy. Although this season was perfectly set up for Ozzy to finally get his long-awaited Survivor win, it also put to the forefront the flaw in his gameplay, and with that we also began to see the fall in popularity of a Survivor player. This season started out in the classic Captain Season surprise entrance, and with no surprise, Ozzy was greeted with a huge celebration, whereas people were scratching their head with why Coach was coming back. Well, it turns out Ozzy was actually a last-minute replacement, as they were looking for someone to fit the same crazy vibe that we were used to with Coach.
They were joined by 2 former survivors, Coach, who went to Upolu in blue, and Ozzy, wwho went to Savai'i in red.
They have so much experience.
We first saw a more laid-back version of Ozzy who wanted to really take on the captain's role for his tribe. At least that's what he told himself going into the season, and it didn't last long before we saw what happens to Ozzy after he loses. Keeping it as straightforward and easy to understand as possible, Ozzy wanted to vote out John Cochran and the rest of the tribe didn't. And the end result, well, the end result just doesn't look good at all for Ozzy.
Throws what can only be described as a hissy fit. I kind of thought Ozzy would wake up this morning realizing that he needs to apologize to everybody. That wasn't the case.
At the same time this was all going on, the season was building up to be a war between Ozzy's tribe and Coach's tribe, and it became clear whatever tribe had the majority going into the merge would win the game. In a game-changing Survivor move, Ozzy decides to give the guy he has bullied all season long his idol, gets voted out on purpose, win the Redemption Island duel, and by doing so come into the merge with the numbers. This has been labeled a heroic move and one of the best of all time if it ends up working out, but it ends up being an idiotic mistake. The risk versus reward just doesn't make any sense in this scenario. On top of that, Ozzy's tribe has witnessed the surviving Redemption Island duelist yell at Coach and his tribe every single chance she gets. I always question why he didn't choose to vote out the person he has been bullying all season, yes, bullying for the entire game, and bringing Christina into the alliance, instead of the risk of losing the duel or a crazy situation where Cochran would flip to the other tribe.
I know someone else probably knew that you had it. As far as I'm concerned, tribe boundaries, I mean, if we're at the merge, they don't exist anymore.
Ozzy famously comes back into the game but instantly returns to Redemption Island after Cochran flips, meaning from day 22 to day 36, Ozzy wouldn't be playing Survivor and instead be playing Island Vacation. Not needing to worry about the strategy, he would treat whoever was voted out to a nice meal only to send them on their way to the jury. The crazy thing is, Ozzy could have won the game this way. It shows a flaw with Redemption Island, but it would have been a satisfying ending with Ozzy winning the season. Now, I wouldn't want someone winning Survivor this way every season, but as a one-off scenario, it would be amazing to see. However, same story, different day, as Ozzy would return to the game on day 36, only to be voted out again on day 38 for failing to complete the puzzle.
Selfie wins final immunity!
Haha, so close. So far away. Yet again.
At this point in time, Ozzy has been heartbroken by Survivor 3 times, but after nearly making it to the finish line, he was awarded the fan favorite award exactly 10 years after he won the award the first time around. This time, the fans gave Ozzy the win by the biggest margin in Survivor history, showing that he still was viewed as a popular player. So what exactly happened in his 4th season that made him fall off so hard? Survivor Game Changers. March 2017, 6 years after Ozzy had last played Survivor, and exactly 11 years since his first appearance, Ozzy would play Survivor again. Such a long Survivor career that Ozzy would have played Survivor for his 3rd time before the majority of this cast had the opportunity to play Survivor for the first time. And this gave Ozzy the honor of being the only Survivor contestant to play in every type of season, with all new players, half returning players, half new players, captain season, and now all returning players. And yet, this would end up being Ozzy's worst performance ever. Now, we can't place 100% of the blame on Ozzy for his poor performance this time around, as Game Changers was cursed with all the bigger threats being voted out early, but we can blame Ozzy for being an old dog that couldn't learn any new tricks. The great thing about bringing people back to play Survivor again and again is following the journeys of how they've changed as people, but also how they've adapted new Survivor strategies. Well, Ozzy did none of that. Take the multi-season arc of Boston Rob or the Cops R Us trilogy. They are both satisfying things to watch unfold. With Ozzy, it felt like the same tune every single time he played. This perfectly mirrors how people felt with Colby Donaldson coming back to play Survivor Heroes vs. Villains. It's Superman in a fat suit. Although Ozzy was still a beast in terms of challenge performance, he felt washed up in the year 2017. Ozzy dominated in challenges for the entire season, and as soon as he lost his first individual immunity challenge, he was voted out. This hurts so much more when you take a bigger step back and notice how Ozzy's Survivor adventure ended this time around. It wasn't from losing a single vote, not from a crazy blindside or being the first player ever to be voted out 3 times in a single season. This time it was no surprise that Ozzy was voted out. He was voted out on day 24 after losing the iconic Get a Grip challenge that Ozzy famously had won twice before, with making him undefeated before this moment. The definition of a disappointing performance, making it feel like Ozzy will never return to the same level of popularity. However, I could be wrong. Survivor has proven time and time again that the archetype of jungle person who is a beast at challenges is a recipe for compelling television, as seen throughout Ozzy's entire career. However, with being seen as a huge threat and unable to adapt with a strategic gameplay, I don't see a world where Ozzy has another magical Survivor performance. It wasn't anything specific that saw the fall of the Survivor player, more of a gradual and anticlimactic drop with his unwillingness to try a different way to play. With every passing season, the viewer had a sense that they had already seen what Ozzy had to offer, as the same thing would happen every single time. I think without question, Oscar Ozzy Lusth needs to be considered a Survivor legend. He single-handedly made the Jungle Boy Survivor archetype popular, has lasted 128 days in the game, and has been part of countless iconic moments. Click right here for my video on Jeff Probst's scariest Survivor moments.